Hospitals are supposed to be places of healing, but at Blackwood General, the patients never leave, and neither do the doctors. I used to work the night shift at Blackwood General, an old hospital on the outskirts of town. It was a quiet job, mostly paperwork and the occasional emergency. But one night, everything changed. It started with the sounds footsteps in empty hallways, whispers in vacant rooms. I told myself it was just the building settling, the pipes creaking. But then I saw them, patients, dozens of them, wandering the halls in hospital gowns, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. I tried to speak to them, but they didn't respond, just stared straight ahead, like they were looking through me. I called security, but when they arrived, the patients were gone. "You're just tired," they said. "Get some rest." But the sightings didn't stop. Every night I'd see them patients, doctors, even nurses, all wandering the halls, all silent, all staring. One night, I decided to follow them. I trailed a group of patients down a long, dark hallway, the lights flickering overhead. They led me to an old wing of the hospital, one that had been closed for years. The door was locked, but the patients walked right through it. I hesitated, then used my key card to open the door. What I saw still haunts me to this day. The room was filled with beds, each one occupied by a patient. But they weren't alive. Their bodies were twisted, their faces frozen in expressions of pain and fear. And standing over them were the doctors, their faces hidden behind masks, their hands stained with blood. I ran, my heart pounding, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I quit my job the next day, but I couldn't escape the memories. Sometimes late at night I hear those footsteps again, and I know the hospital is still open. I was a nurse at St. Mary's for 5 years, and in that time I learned one rule: never go into room 13. The room was always locked, the key kept in the head nurse's office. No one knew what was inside, but the rumours were enough to keep us away. "It's cursed," one of the older nurses told me. "Anyone who goes in never comes out." I laughed it off, thinking it was just a story. But one night, I decided to see for myself. I waited until the shift change, when the halls were empty, and took the key from the office. The door to room 13 was old, the paint peeling, the handle rusted. I unlocked it and stepped inside. The room was dark, the air thick, with the smell of antiseptic and something rotten. I turned on the light, but it flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. At first, it seemed normal, just a hospital room. A bed, a chair, a sink. But then I saw a figure lying in the bed. It was a man, his body covered in bandages, his face hidden. I approached him, my heart pounding, and reached out to check his pulse. But when I touched him, his hand shot up and grabbed my wrist. His grip was icy, unrelenting. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice low and guttural. I screamed and pulled away, but the door slammed shut behind me. The light flickered, and in the darkness I saw them dozens of figures, their bodies twisted, their faces frozen in expressions of pain and fear. I don't remember how I got out. The next morning, they found me in the hallway, shaking and pale. I quit my job that same day, but I couldn't escape the memories. Sometimes, late at night, I hear that voice again, and I know room 13 is still waiting. Doctors are supposed to save lives, but at Mercy General there's a doctor who takes them, and he's still practicing. I was a medical student doing my residency at Mercy General, an old hospital with a reputation for strange occurrences. But I didn't believe in ghosts until I met Dr. Blackwood. He was a legend among the staff, a brilliant surgeon who had worked at the hospital decades ago. But there was something off about him. His eyes were cold, his smile too wide, and his hands were always stained with blood. I first saw him in the operating room, standing over a patient, his scalpel glinting in the light. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another surgery, but then I noticed something strange. The patient wasn't moving. I approached the table, my heart pounding, and checked the patient's pulse. There was none. "What are you doing?" Dr. Blackwood asked, his voice low and guttural. I turned to him, but he was gone. The operating room was empty, the lights flickering, the only sound the hum of the machines. I told the other doctors what I'd seen, but they just shook their heads. "Dr. Blackwood died years ago," one of them said. "You must be mistaken." But I wasn't. Over the next few weeks, I saw him again and again in the operating room, in the hallways, even in the morgue, and every time there was a patient who didn't make it. One night, I decided to confront him. I followed him down a long, dark hallway, the lights flickering overhead. He led me to an old wing of the hospital, one that had been closed for years. The door was locked, but Dr. Blackwood walked right through it. I hesitated, then used my keycard to open the door. What I saw still haunts me to this day. The room was filled with beds, each one occupied by a patient. But they weren't alive. Their bodies were twisted, their faces frozen in expressions of pain and fear. And standing over them was Dr. Blackwood, his scalpel glinting in the light. I ran, my heart pounding, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I quit my residency the next day, but I couldn't escape the memories. Sometimes late at night, I hear that scalpel scraping against bone, and I know Dr. Blackwood is still practicing.